Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome, everyone, to Project Management Office Hours, the #1 live project management radio show in the United States, broadcasting to you today from our Phoenix Business Radio X studio in Tempe, Arizona. I'm your host, Joe Pusz, PMO Joe, and for the next hour, we'll be talking project management with our special guests. Also want to thank our sponsors, the PMO Squad. Are you tired of failed projects? Deploy the squad to rescue your PMO and projects. Start recovering lost time, money, and peace of mind. Visit www.thepmosquad.com to learn more about all of their project management services. Before we get into the show, I always like to touch on a couple of things we've got going on in my life. And with Veterans Day coming up, I also want to mention, for our frequent listeners, you're aware I'm running the Marine Corps Marathon on October 28th. So we're less than 2 weeks away. Excited and nervous, both at the same time. And I'm also fundraising for a charity called Team Red, White, and Blue, which supports veterans getting back into their communities through physical exercise and activities. Right now, I am #1 in the country for the number of donations received and #2 in the country for amount of money received. So it'd be great if we can get up to #1. And if you have the ability and desire, certainly appreciate a donation. You can go to pmojoe.com, and there's a link to the Team Red, White, and Blue site, as well as a link to the fundraising page. Learn more about Team Red, White, and Blue. They are a great, great charity. Also, a couple weeks back, we had a show with Warwick Pond and Hussein Banakawala. Warwick is a executive director over at ASU, and just want to thank Warwick once again for the donation they made to our Veterans Project Management Mentoring Program that we sponsor with Vets to PM and Veterans to Work. With that donation from ASU, we'll have some veterans who will be able to get some PMP certification and project management training gifted to us from ASU. So thank you, Warwick. And Hussein has been running the PMO, the virtual PMO Summit. That is a free summit with over 20 PMO leaders across the world who've come together to give you insights, tips, and tricks on how to run PMOs. Learn from their experience instead of the hard knocks way of learning from yourself. I'm fortunate to be a presenter in that summit. My presentation is using the PMO approach to build or improve your PMO. Today is the last day of that summit. You can register for free and go out to virtualpmosummit.com to get that access. Also, a reminder to our listeners that we are monitoring Twitter to prove we're actually a live show. You can tweet your questions in for our guests using hashtag PMOJoe, and we will get to those questions live on air and have our guests respond to you. Speaking of guests, we have 3 of them in studio today. So welcome Jeanne Barry, Thor Thomsen, and Jim Watkinson. Jeanne, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for letting us be here. This is awesome. My background originally was actually broadcast journalism. Funny enough. That's what I went to school for, and then decided to get into the IT world. Got into project management through KeyBank, which you're from Albany, New York originally, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you're familiar with KeyBank.
Yeah.
And I was with them for about 18 years or so. And then I got into the contracting consulting world. I moved out to Arizona about 6 years ago and worked from home remotely, with Key, and then got into the consulting world. And I love it. Been doing this in project management. So about total over 20 some years, let's say that, in project management, and not looking back. And my forte is infrastructure engineering project management with InfoSec or information security concentration. That's what I'm doing right now, actually.
That's great.
Yeah.
And we'll learn a little bit more as we go along on the show, obviously, with your big background and experience in project management, but also some of the good will that you're doing on the side from some of your personal interests as well, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. So working with Andre House, there's veterans there too, for the homeless. And then also Feed My Starving Children, which is a great organization here in Mesa. Basically feed the world, the children of the world. And it's really fun little things that we do. It's like group tables, and you try and, make the food, box it and all that as quickly as you can. It's like a really fun game that we all play. So I try to do that as much as I can. And also like to sing too. So I'm a singer on the side.
That's fantastic.
Keep me busy.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of feeding, we have Thor Thomsen, who's the founder, president, CEO, all the big titles for THORFeed. Thor, welcome, and let our listeners learn a little bit more about you.
Good morning, Joe. Grew up in Wisconsin, so grew up deep behind the cheese curtain, as I like to say, and on a farm. So that gives me a little bit different perspective on life and hard work. Ended up going to college in Indiana at a Christian liberal arts, Taylor University, where I graduated with a degree in communication studies. And with the economy being bad, it was not a good time for employment. And I ended up going into the Marine Corps and was involved in special operations, traveling around the world and understanding. Really, Joe, say thank you for your work with the veterans.
Oh, well, thank you for your service, obviously.
You're welcome.
Without your service, we don't have the freedoms that we enjoy and the ability to do things like this show. So thank you so much.
It's fun. It's a privilege. It really is. And coming out of that, one of my big things was to learn the situational awareness, project management, teamwork, things that are important. And I started working with my family, my dad, and his businesses. We dealt with emergency response to hazardous chemicals and disasters around the world. And then a little event called 9/11 happened, and that got bigger. And we started working with schools and hospitals and sporting venues. And so I inadvertently fell into the PMO realm without the training. And then one of the associates that I started working with, Mr. Ron Torgerson, said, hey, why don't you consider working for us? And he introduced me to PMO and the training, and I went through all that. And so I honed my skills as I was dealing with a specific program for the Department of Defense, setting up their food defense program. Everybody was looking at gates. Everybody's looking at airplanes, tanks, people. Nobody was looking at their food. So I've done over 2,000 vulnerability assessments, risk assessments around the globe with the food and food supply chain. And that contract ended as a contractor. Yes. Yes. So Jeannie gets that. Uh-huh. And Joe, you get that too.
Absolutely.
And I said, what if I developed some software that would help streamline this and take the different threats and hazards and operational risks? And that became the platform for THORFeed. And we moved to Arizona, had a friend here say, hey, could you do something for farms that have an issue? And that began the journey for farm inventory and feed inventory.
That's fantastic. Great story. Thanks for your service, and glad to have you with us here today. Jim Watkinson is our third guest today with us in studio. Jim, share with us a little bit, please, if you would, about yourself.
Well, thank you, Joe, for having us. I'm a little bit different. I am a technology guy. I grew up in technology. That's what I wanted to do. When I got out of high school, computers were just starting to be the big thing. And I said, I've got to run them. And so that's what I did. I joined companies like IBM and Unisys and really helped introduce technology to many new industries. And that's what I enjoy doing. Let's take something that we can bring into a new industry and make it run better. That's what I like to do. And so my whole career has been this series of taking technology, figuring out what industries need it and how we can improve that industry. So I met Thor a couple of years ago in our church group, and we started talking, and he had a solution that required technology in an industry that probably didn't accept technology as it could have. And so we've been plotting to figure out a way to help farmers improve their operations with this technology. So it's the sweet spot that I love to be in. So that's where I am.
Well, thanks for being with us. We've been doing this show for about eight plus months now, I guess, and we haven't had any project management discussions based on the farming industry. So I'm really looking forward to that today. It's so common to think of project management in the IT space, but it really cuts across all industries. So I think we're going to have a great discussion. Thank you all for being here, and really looking forward to it. So, Jeanne, you had mentioned your background a little bit and talked about infrastructure and InfoSec.
Right.
And we've got two great leaders here from THORFeed. And if we look at that and say, how, as a project manager, a consultant, or employee, do you deal with leaders who want to take control of projects before the project manager does?
Yeah. If I had that silver bullet, I'd probably be a millionaire right now. It's all about communication. I mean, let's just be honest, and personality and how you approach people. At the end of the day, we're people, no matter what we do, farming or IT or what have you. So going with facts is also good, because a lot of these people are guys, but girls too, but hard facts. So you got to have like a charter. You got to have your documentation all buttoned up, right? Requirements. And if they start going off the rails, you can say, okay, look, if you want this done on at this time, this budget, all this, you're going to have to pay attention to what you're telling us to do. So that's what I do. I make sure that we gather the facts, get everything down, and things change. We're human. We forget, especially with requirements gathering. Having a good business analyst as a PM is also paramount, I feel, because their forte is gathering the requirements. And that, I think, if your foundation is not good, it's a house of cards and it's going to fall. So charter, requirements, and then from there you get your project plan. So what I like to do is have charter feed into the requirements, and that feeds into the project plan. So there's that thread that you take all the way through, so that when they have to assess the project at the end, did you do what you said you were going to do? Yes. And it's kind of like a checklist of sorts. So that's the way I like to run my projects. Now, if they're going to go off the rails, and it depends if you're agile or waterfall. I do a lot of waterfall, quite frankly, because infrastructure engineering, there's an argument out there that you can use agile with infrastructure, and you can, but I haven't really seen it done successfully. I'll just say it like that. But I do have a background in agile and ITIL. So communication and fact gathering, I think, is the way to derail them in, and then just have meetings and be open and use the phone. Don't hide behind emails and don't hide behind IMing. They want to hear from your voice.
Yeah. And obviously with a background in communication, and Thor is communication, my master's degree is organizational communication,
Okay,
right? Communication theme, I find within project managers. And it's the soft skills, right, that really separate the great project managers from the good ones, and having the courage to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Now, Thor, I would imagine, and Jim, working within the farming industry, obviously some big personalities there as well, because, let's face it, these people own their farms. It's their livelihood, right? It's theirs. They're not a separate company. It's their own piece of that. How do you work with them, these farm owners, in their strong personalities as you're going about your work?
Oh, Joe, they're all humble. They're nice. We don't have any problems like that. Communications just flows. They get project management.
Can I work for you guys?
It's very, very interesting, the dynamics that come up, because you typically have a generational environment, and you bump into the phrase, "This is how we've always done it."
I hate that phrase.
Or, "This is how my grandpa did it."
Yeah.
That's common, but you also don't have an environment where people have, I'll say, been highly educated. And if you mention project management, they're like, just tell me plain language. So the neat part is, you gotta do it. You can't fake it. And it's exceptionally real. But the communications, like you said, Jeanne, is absolutely imperative. And to be honest. If you're honest, even if you messed up, even if they messed up, as long as you're looking forward, you've got that charter, that focus, you've got your guides, it really, really helps. And then you've got somebody like Jim along who takes it to a whole nother level.
I think one of the key things here is we have to recognize that every farm is different. And we can't come in and say to a farmer, we're going to change your operations. Just believe us. They're not going to buy that. So what we have to do is we have to really learn how they operate their business, and then figure out how we can adjust and integrate these processes, the project management approach of planning and then monitoring and then reviewing so that they can see this. And once we get their confidence, we can then push the envelope to do more planning. That's what we find.
I think a great example, we recently did that's the plural we. I was sick.
The royal we.
Jim and another gentleman, Greg Youngs, did a post-harvest debrief. Pretty basic project management to go through and look at that. The gentleman who owned the farm has been a farmer for 68 years. His son's involved. They've had employees who are involved for over 30 years. Never done that. Said, wow, this is amazing. And now we go down, I've been there, Jim has too. We go back to their office area and they have actionable items, they have schedules, they have goals, they have things written down. They're really making a big step forward, and they don't understand that they're doing project management.
They're running it like a true business.
Yes.
Now.
Yes.
That's good.
And the thing we have to realize is that when you look at a farm really is a production facility. We take raw materials, put it into inventory, apply it to machines, our cows, and then we produce a marketable product, cheese, milk, ice cream, whatever. And if what we can do is if we see the harvest activity of gathering, the storing activity, and the utilization of the feed are all processes that have a start, an end, and a repeat. So we can apply project management approaches to those three different cycles without even calling it project management. It's just planning, executing, monitoring, review. Those things happen. And we haven't used the word project management. We haven't used the word, there's a lot of words we're not talking about. It's just the things that we're doing to get them thinking about.
You're using the project lifecycle process actually from PMBOK. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
There you go.
You can take it out of the book and bring it right there.
That's good. And it's nice you guys are doing, like they said, the post-mortem, or whatever we call it in our lingo. But
retrospectives.
Thank you, retrospectives. And seeing the fruits of your labor, which is interesting because, in your farming, the fruits of your labor, now they're actually doing it on a figurative type basis instead of literally. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's neat to sit there and say, what would you like to improve? And they think, I don't know. We're doing good. We're doing good. And then you start kind of inching in. And this is what's really unique for me in this industry is to come in and to say, your feed and feed management is over 50% of your expense. So on a 7,000 head farm, or say 1,000 head farm, Jim, how much would that be?
Well, the cost on an annual basis of a 1,000 head farm using average costs is about $2.5 million to feed all those animals. And when you look at we call it what is called the loss you have in your feed, it's called feed shrink. It ranges anywhere from 6 to 30%. And the average is 18. So what we do is we sit down with a farmer and we say, okay, here's 1,000 head. Your farm's 1,000 head. Your average cost per head is $7. Let's say you're very good at managing your feed shrink and it's at 10%. That means that 70 cents on every cow you're losing.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That means every day you're losing $700. At the end of the year, that's $250,000 of lost feed.
Plus interest on the loan that you took to get the feed and the equipment.
So you're quantifying it for them so they can see.
People know the cost per cow. They know the number of cows they have. They're not looking at the big picture of what's it costing me every year. $250,000 is a tractor and a couple other buildings.
I like you guys are doing this too because, some of our government subsidized, so it's actually coming out of my tax money. At the end of the day, you're saving me money. So That's awesome.
And that's what's neat about this is to say there are farmers that when we started the program and we started our beta project, we were mentored by farmers who sit there and literally, I'll say, micromanage and really get the concept of project management in saying, here's what I'm going to harvest. Here's the 20 steps. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to measure, manage, look at this, put it all together. And these are the guys, men and women, who beat me and Jim over the head for 4 years now and have said, this is how you have to do it. And their margins are so much more significant. And yet, Joe, we get to an environment where unless it's kind of a special event, one farmer doesn't sit down for lunch with the other. And it's like, hey, I got my own little fiefdom here.
Share the wealth and knowledge.
And think of other industries, right? It's great to hear about something you're unfamiliar with and then find commonality with what you are familiar with. Mm-hmm. So whether it's healthcare or semiconductor or retail or e-commerce or others, they go through those same exercises, right?
Yeah.
In creating your business case before your project, identifying your requirements before you execute on your project. Mm-hmm. In farming, we don't, us uneducated to the industry, don't think in those spaces, right? We don't understand the metrics that Jim just talked about, but we certainly understand ROI and business case. And to see them exercised in that industry is fantastic, right? And to be able to understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and then project management takes it back and says, all right, so are you capable of doing this? Because you may come up with the best plan, the best charter, the best action items.
True, yeah.
Best schedule, best Gantt chart.
Yeah.
If they're not capable, it doesn't matter.
True.
And you talk about the communications, Jeannie. Over half the staff is speaking Spanish and don't speak English.
Okay.
So now what?
Yeah, that's an interesting wrinkle, huh?
Now, there's always, I find it, and Jeannie, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, right? There's a balance between and process and execution, right? And being able to understand how to manage a project or a program and not over-process it and let the team actually go deliver.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you do that? And it ties in a little bit to what Thor was just talking about.
See, we've meetings on meetings on meetings on meetings. But unfortunately, how do you get people to talk and see what's going on unless you have these meetings? So putting them on in a spotlight and say, look, this is what we need to do. You guys have a job to do. What are the roadblocks? What are the speed bumps? What's going on with you? So I can help you as a project manager buffer and keep the noise away so that you can do your job effectively and efficiently. So getting them to do what they need to do. I mean, just, again, pulling up the facts. And also, too, you have to make sure that there's buy-in from everybody in the beginning. You can't just say, okay, I'm writing up a charter. You guys, these are the requirements, and it's a continuous process. And getting them engaged and making them want to do this, even though they're getting paid for it, they have to want to do it and want to be involved. Just like the guys at the farms. You guys can tell the farmers, what they should do, but you got to engage them and get them to want to do it. Numbers is a good way to do it. Money is a good way to do it. But how else do you get them to want to incentivize them to do it? Right?
And that's a great point. And that's some of the things that we had to do, which are kind of out of the normal realm, and especially with a project management program in a startup. You have to find those things. So, Jim, what is one of the first things that we show the farmers?
Oh, yeah. This is really interesting. Well, what do you do in a project? You want people to see what the end game should look like.
Yes.
So you want to give them the big picture.
Exactly.
So one of the things we do after a couple of meetings is we take a satellite picture of the farm, or we get a satellite picture of the farm, and we show them where all their buildings are, where their cattle graze, where all their feed is. And when we do this, farmers will take minutes to look at this photograph. And some of them are touched by it, saying, I've never seen my farm like this before. This is the first time. And they immediately look at it and say, what can I do to make this better? So that is how we start to introduce the big picture, the planning process. This is what we need to do. We need to think long range so that we can come back here and start to develop the steps to get to where you want to be.
Start with the end in mind.
And that's where we get their buy-in. Okay. You first show them that there's a cost improvement, and then there's an operational improvement, and they say, gee, this is momentum here that is going forward for us.
Well, the more I hear about this, the more I like what I'm hearing, because when we look at PMI, right, the Project Management Institute, every year they put out a survey called the Pulse of the Profession and give us data back on what's working and what's not working. And the number one indicator or reason for project success is an actively engaged executive sponsor. Mm-hmm. In a farm, that becomes easier, I think, than in a traditional industry.
That's true.
Because the farm is usually, sounds like single owned, long-time owner, heavily invested in the performance. Getting them actively engaged, I think, then helps make your projects become more successful.
Right.
Yeah, and then you take it to another level like we do on the front end, where we will come into a farm and go through these items. We discuss this. We talk about the project, what has to happen, and we start off with our software to say this is your entree in, and this helps organize that. But the other part that we sit down and do is to say, this will help simplify what you're doing and transform what you're doing. And we say, we believe in it so much, we'll give you 60, 90 days free. Anytime along the road, you want to kick us out? Go. We haven't been kicked out. And it causes us to perform at a higher level because you're at risk.
True.
And we talk about the risk factors and project management and who's got buy-in. And boy, it's been one of the scariest things for me as a small business owner and an entrepreneur and startup in a field that I have not worked in full time, to bring a product to bear and be liable for all the risk, really.
Yeah. And certainly we've heard a lot of the good so far in the discussion, but I'm assuming there are plenty of challenges and competition that you have to overcome to be able to be successful, right? Any new venture has those challenges. What are some of those unique components within the farming industry? What are you running into that's making it a challenge?
I think that there's a couple different places. First of all, I'm going to start with, there's a group of farmers who have really used technology and feel they're doing quite well. And they say, we don't need any new adjustments. And that's a small percentage, 10 or 15%. There's another percentage who just don't want to change. They've been doing it forever. And that's another 15 or 20%. What we're focusing on is that 70, 80% in the middle that will look at technology and say, okay, this can help me. So what we have to do then is walk in and, again, not tell them that we're going to change their business, but try to learn their business and then gradually bring in these processes and these procedures so that they accept them. So we're going to get some people that say no. That's okay. We're going to get some people who are going to be slow to get on board, but we eventually do it. That's one of the challenges. The other challenge we have is because every farm is different, we have to adjust. We have to adjust our technique. I mentioned every farm is different. We have to adjust our technique so that we can win over these people and get them so that they can see the benefits. So that, and I think another challenge we have is we're not going to go knock on doors. We want to have what we call business partners who are in the dairy industry, who know us well and know we've been successful, to introduce us. So we have a team of veterinarians. We talk to some banks. Banks love us because we actually, because our reporting can be done monthly, and it's very accurate, banks look at farms who use our software as a lower interest rate. As a lower risk. So they provide a lower interest rate, so the farmer pays less for his loan. So we Our challenge is to go out and work with the banks, the veterinarians, the feed producers, so that we can partner with them. Us knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, we can save you, 10% on your feed," probably isn't gonna work. But if a veterinarian who a farmer trusts very, very well knows us and respects us, they will introduce us, and that helps a lot. So.
Yeah, and I think a big thing, which is really different here, is the relationship. Jeannie, you said that.
Yep.
And the trust.
Yeah.
You don't get trust.
No, you got to build it. You got to earn it.
So there's this cultural thing of where they may not be able to engage because their nature is, I got to see it to believe it. First we try, then we trust.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
right.
different from a corporate environment where you've got infrastructure where it's like, oh no, we got to look
to get this done because we're going to get, fined or what have you, because if we don't do these certain things.
And it's, and it's a different environment to look at that and have that there where we talk about Six Sigma or lean.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do you get a cow Six Sigma? How do you get a cow lean? And looking at the process.
Corn.
But there's some commonalities as I think about this, right? Jeannie, as a consultant, you're going into each client is new. And as much as they're doing with the farms and having to go in and learn that business and learn that farm, how it works, you're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah,
you need to go learn.
There's a commonality there. Exactly.
Share with us a little bit of that, that mindset as a project management consultant versus your time when you were project management employee.
Right. FTE for 18 years. Yeah. So, just the personalities and learning, what makes people tick and understanding their nature like you guys do, when you go to farm to farm, and each farmer has their own personality, as you know. It's also, showing your skill set and letting them learn to trust you. And I've got a great resume and I look good on paper, but prove it, so you got to go in there and not go in like a bulldog. You have to go in softly and learn their business. I was thinking, that's what I do too. Because I also had a little stint setting up a PMO for a company as well, because I've got a little background. When I worked at Key, we created a PMO, and we had the infrastructure team, the development team, and the line of business team all had PMs. And we all had to come together, and we all had these different personalities and, that dark side, because it's like, the development people, they don't understand infrastructure and back and forth. So we really got to understand each other, and I learned a lot from that experience while I was managing projects too. So then I took those skills when I got hired on to do like a 4 or 5 month little stint as a consultant, and I set up a PMO for someone. And I'm thinking, as you guys are talking, Thor and Jim, the same things I was doing, learning their personality, learning their business. That's the first thing you got to do. And what I made them do is I said, okay, what do you do? And I made them think from soup to nuts, when the work comes in, when the sales come in, to operations, when it has to be supported. Mm-hmm. Same thing, that's right? I did the same thing. So what are you guys doing? And then we sat down and we got down to the brass tacks of, okay, how can we fix this or help you or save you time and money? Now, it wasn't obviously corn and feed, milk and all that stuff, but it was a process that they needed to fine tune. And I was in the middle. I'm the project management. So I was coming in and I had to fine tune the project management piece of it. And then how does it go to the support team? And that was a really cool, experience to do that and to learn. And I learned a lot about myself as well, So having them understand where I'm coming from, but knowing that I'm understanding them back, I think that come see, come saw, then the synergies start to build, and then that trust starts to build. Right. So again, the theme here is people.
Well, and I think project management, again, one of the reasons we do this show is to help educate and elevate our profession.
Yes.
And to show that it doesn't matter the industry. Mm-hmm. Our challenges and our benefits are really the same. Right. Now, the work becomes different. The product or service that you're producing certainly is unique from a farm compared to a data center or a PMO.
Right.
But we're finding the commonality. And as project managers, from an education perspective, for those listening, know that you don't have to pick an industry that is going to make you be successful in project management. Have your passion for project management and find the industry you want to go use it in.
Absolutely.
Amen.
And I think, as we look at, we're just looking at feed. But if you look at the production process of a dairy, there are so many other activities that could use project management in any farm, from even if you don't have cattle. There's planting, there's equipment project management. How do you manage your equipment and all your resources? There's a lot of ways where project management can be applied in several different aspects of any farm. It doesn't sound like it, but because it's a process and it's a cycle, it can be done there.
Mm-hmm. And even do some Lean Six Sigma on those things, and then you go in and project manage to get it to where it needs to be. Yeah, to streamline it. Yeah, good stuff.
So THORFeed, I think, Thor, you mentioned you're about 4 years. Is that correct?
4 years from inception.
What's next, right? You're still learning to crawl, I think, as a company, right? So where do you go?
To crawl. We have a number of customers, and we are developing. So my concept here for THORFeed is the feed portion on a farm, as you're looking at it and saying this is an area that's not really looked at. And in lean times, airlines right now are wondering where they're going to get their fuel, and because that fuels the jets. So the farmers are running into hard times now. So we look at the feed, but there's also a whole nother area of inventory on the farm.
Yeah, storage.
Do you know what tractors you have? Do you know the equipment that you have? How many tanks do you have? And you'd be amazed at, I know it sounds kind of silly, but we walk around farms and we're like, hey, you guys know that there's 6 boxes with refrigerators over there.
Just sitting there.
And they're covered with pigeon poop.
Oh.
How long have they? Oh, yeah, we've had those about 9 years.
Wow.
Gosh, and we're like, if you sold those on eBay right now, you'd pay for our stuff for the month. Next week we come back and they're gone.
It's good.
It's little stuff like this, but so first of all, it's the feed, then it's the general inventory, and we've been asked to get into more of the project management and consulting. So farms will come and say, hey, how do we handle this with the year, with the harvest? They're looking at post-harvest. They're saying, how are we doing this as a team to be able to work with that? Recommending books like Scaling Up, and that's a fantastic book if somebody has not read
Scaling
that.
Up, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. It's the compendium of business books, I think, to be able to do that. But it's looking at that and looking to the future of the industry and some of the things that are out there. So I don't think it will just be here. As Jim said, we're getting involved with the feed mills who are saying, wait a minute, or the farms actually, who are saying, I'm a 2-3 person shop. I got to call a mill. Then I got to go over there, sign for it. Can't I just use your app and have it automatically order?
Nice.
And the bank say, hey, you got a line of credit. You're good to go. I mean, and just be able to do that. So working with mills and then working with farms. And then we've been asked, especially with all the rain in the Midwest and the flooding, to look at the ability to say, as a farmer, why do I have to go through all these commodities exchanges and sell them to brokers and mills? If a farmer in Pennsylvania wants my hay, I just send it to you. And can the app order a truck, get the feed, do the billing, and walk through that process?
The logistics is great. Just streamlines the whole thing.
So there's a number of areas that get in there. And this is where I look at you, Jeannie, and I'm like, IT, support, help, project management.
Yes.
I'm not an IT guy.
Yeah.
I'm just a Marine trying to figure this out and in the wrong.
That's why you got Jim. That's what he's for.
Well, the beauty of where you say you're just a Marine, right, is that, again, I love finding commonalities of across the board of project management. In the military, you had mission after mission with a defined beginning and end with a desired outcome. Therefore, a project.
Yes.
So you've been project managing for decades. And now you're finding a way to use that in a new space.
Yeah.
And when I hear this discussion, and Jeannie, I'm sure you're thinking the same thing. To me, it sounds like you've got each of these farms has multiple programs, of which there's a project working underneath them, or multiple projects, obviously, to make the program. And Jeannie, as an experienced program manager, right?
I've done it too, yeah.
You feel the sense of how do you work with them to execute each project cumulatively to benefit a program.
Right. Yeah. Do you have multiple program or project managers under a program manager yet?
No.
You guys are still okay.
No.
Because I can see THORFeed and more coming. It's not just going to be THORFeed. It's going to be THORFeed and more.
There's Thor Farm, which is incorporated and being set up and developed.
That's cool. Okay.
To be able to look at that, but then expand that. And you guys, here's the big thing that I learned out of the Marine Corps is my why, which is, my passion is to simplify and transform.
Yeah.
So if I can sit there and say, can you look on your phone and know that you have $2.5 million worth of feed in bags, in pits, in piles, in bins, and you know you're within 2%.
And you say that's no different than you've got 100 racks with 100 servers with a certain amount of sand that cost you $2.5 million as an organization. And is it current?
That's the way I look at it.
And is it being utilized? And is it efficient?
Is it out of support yet? Or yeah. Well, we'll go VM. Forget it. Forget the physical boxes.
Right.
We'll just go VM.
You can't go VM with feed.
No, you can't. You can't.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Can you imagine virtual cows? Oh, gosh.
The other thing the farmer's going to look at is, okay, I've got all this feed. When do I need more?
Oh, yeah. And that, just in time.
Well, no, not there. It's just when do I have to replace this? And that's one of the things we provide so that they have a long horizon to figure out what their next step is. Do I buy it? Do I plant it? What do I do? And that gives them comfort. So if I know that every 6 months there's a harvest cycle, if I can start to plan and I know how many cows I'm going to have, I can really get precision as to what I need with a long time to produce that. That gives me comfort.
Yeah.
I'm not lying awake at night thinking, I don't know where I'm going to feed these cows. I don't know what I'm going to feed these cows in a month or a week.
And the opportunity cost of that, they can focus on other things on the business and not worry and be up at night, and they can sleep well. And
and they go through and do this right now. Something that was interesting to me, Arizona is one of the biggest exporters of hay in the United States because we can grow, and it's about every 90 days a new crop can be put in.
Yeah.
And so these farms will sit there and say, I'm going to offset my costs by selling my hay overseas. Now, that means that they have to manage what land they have. Here, water's a resource, so they don't have that. And they start putting these things together. And when you take them from, hey, we're worried about this, and we always keep about 9 months worth of feed on the shelf. And you're like, well, that 9 months worth of feed just kind of, it's feed.
Yeah.
It degrades.
Yeah. I was going to say, does it go bad? And this is part of the 18% degradation, right?
Yeah.
The feed loss, right? You guys are talking about?
So question would be, as I'm hearing all of this, right, my brain is just going.
I'm interested. You can tell I'm really into this farm stuff.
Where are the requirements, though? Right. So, Jeannie, right, you're going through your projects. You mentioned at the top of this is you work from your charter into your requirements, into your plan, et cetera. Where are you hearing requirements in any of this? You're hearing end results, and you're.
I think they're gathering them, but they didn't actually say requirements.
Well, I think what we're asking is, when we try to learn about their farm, is number one, how many cows do you want to feed? So then we identify how much feed we need. And then the next question we ask is not only how many cows you want to feed, is what quality of milk do you want to produce? Because that will identify the types of feed that provide the nutrition to give you the highest quality milk. So those are the requirements that we ask early in the process.
How do you guys copy those down or gather them?
Well, what we do actually in the room is the nutritionist. Okay. The head of the farm says the most important thing for me is quality of milk. I'm going to have 2,400 cows. I need to have this quality of, and there's a certain phrase that they use. And so the nutritionist has to plan for 2,400 cows with this nutrition requirement to produce this quality of milk. They have to do that research. That's why you need a nutritionist in the room to do that part. And it's their job to manage the plant. It's there to identify how much feed And then someone else, an agronomist, has got to watch that feed and then find out when is the right time to harvest it at the right length, let it dry out sufficiently, then pack it and then store it. And each one of those steps is where shrink happens.
Okay.
So in that whole process, we are identifying what you need to do to maximize your harvest return.
How do you document that, though?
So it all comes down to two things.
What?
First, you have to measure.
Okay.
And then you can manage.
You write all this down, right? You have
So
spreadsheets.
so here's what you got in. Here's your tonnage. Here's where you put it. Here's what form you put it in. And you start with that and you say, this is my money in the bank. And then you measure that and you watch that process with a good series of checklists, good evaluation, good metrics for those. And then you watch that go through the inventory and supply chain process and you say, here we go. You know, you're putting these things into a pit and you're supposed to run over it, and Jim and I will go out and check the tire pressure or the actual weight of the tractor to see if it's actually compressing it. And then we come back and we're like, not so much. You've got this guy driving over here for 24 hours over this giant pit, but he's half his weight he should be to get the compression that you need to stop the degradation in the process.
Wow, you guys get really nitty gritty.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Right.
feel U-Haul likes me because I get the book boxes, which are 1 cubic meter or one cubic foot, and we fill that with feed that falls out of trucks, out of the pits, out of the pods, the stuff that blows around. We collect that up, and you sit there and you look out in a parking lot, and you've got 30 bunches of this, and you're like, that's $1,800 laying there.
I think I found a new tagline for you guys.
What?
Shrink happens.
Yep.
But we'll prevent it.
But and that's the thing. It's like all of us. I was telling Jim on the way over here, the feed inventory, and we talk about project management. Let's bring it home as a family. If I don't have something in the fridge or I don't have what I want, I can run to the store, or I'll just go over to Culver's or out to eat. You can't take 1,500 head of cattle out to eat real quick.
Right.
And you got to think ahead. And somewhere between this whole margin, and it's really a challenge. And this is where this whole project management comes together, and the people and the communications to say, man, you have got a hard job 24/7, 7 days a week.
They do.
52, weeks a year.
Yeah.
In, out, whether you're there or not. These cattle need to be milked. They need to be taken care of. They need to be nurtured. The feed has to get in.
Yeah.
This is not, hey, I go home and I'm just a, 0.1 or 0.9 FTE. It is 24/7. And when you can simplify that and transform that and then
Save money and
save
time.
money and time, all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, you mean I can go out there and scan this with my phone? We use QR codes along the bags or along the forms.
Smart.
And you say, all right, I put 1,000 pounds of feed in, or 1,000 tons of feed in here. Every 10, 20 feet, we put a tag on there. And then they just scan it as they go along. And just that quick, it updates. And they're like, oh, now I don't have to go to my ranch hand who's helping me with the feed. I don't have to go to the guy who's pulling it out of the feed. I don't have to go to 3 other people to guess. And you know what? The technology supersedes the communications barrier. You get out your app, you pull it up, they're downloading it in 30 seconds saying,
You can't argue with it.
Code.
Yeah, this is
Code. I mean, and the younger people who are doing this work may not speak English, but boy, they can download an app and get it.
Oh yeah, that's true too. I keep forgetting the language barrier. You guys have that extra nuance here.
And it's neat to see the boss be like, well, I don't know if I want him to do that. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, well, you haven't updated your report. Who's out there scanning now? And so you don't get that initial buy-in because typically they're not the tech leader on the farm. So it's real different.
So, Jeanne, you had touched on something that I want to follow up on. You had talked about what tools you're using, right? Spreadsheets and Microsoft Project. And so what are some of the standard tools you use to help along the course of a project?
You hit on them. Microsoft Project and Excel. Those are the main two ones. We have a tool called Jira. It's pretty standard. That's we gather our issues and risks on that. But I would say Word, Excel, all the Office products, you can think of. Excel's our best friend, pretty much. And the project plan, we use, of course, MS Project that helps us in the Gantt charts to help you see. It's nice because it rolls up to 1% complete. Sometimes is that really, I think it's 20%, you kind of swag. And then you get, and then we also have status reports that we do on a weekly basis. That's one of our tools as well to help. It helps you gather what's going on the project too and dump it on a piece of paper, right? Or electronic paper. And then it also helps you communicate with upper management, in my corporate settings that I deal with. And, those are the main tools that we use. Of course there's this other tools like your communication and all those kinds of things that we do. But, for hard tools, that's what we utilize. And then every now and then I might pull out the PMBOK. They're like, oh God, Jeannie. I'm like, this is what we're supposed to be. So I'm by the book, but at the same time, people need structure. And if you can bring them back to the structure, I think that helps get a home base and they feel comfortable. They're back in a comfort zone. Because there's a lot of chaos on projects, let's be honest. If you can manage that chaos with some structure, I think that's half the battle. And tools are a good way to do that.
So, and I'm wondering from, again, it sounds like project management to farming is fairly new, much like it used to be in other industries, and project management as a whole. Formal project management is really only 50 years old or so, right? So it's new to begin with. But some industries are obviously more widespread and adopted it. So within farming, you're having these conversations and you're showing the benefits. Do you actually do things like build a Microsoft project schedule for these activities? How deep are you getting into the PM side of it?
This is before Jim answers that, because
he's chomping. I can see
I wish you guys could have seen this when Jim and I started working together, but he'll explain some of this. Jeannie, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and after Jim asks, sorry, I'm not trying to hijack this, Joe. I'm really eager to ask you, how do you organize like a good meeting?
Just let you think on that agenda.
Yeah, Jim. Jim, what do we do? Do we have a...
Well, on the software development side, we do everything that you do, okay? But on the farm, what we're introducing now are Excel spreadsheets with identification of the next 6 months. This is what we have to do for the next harvest. Who's going to do what? Who's taking responsibility? When are they going to do it? So it's a very simple checklist. That's what we're doing now. Okay. So right now, we're trying to get the farmers, we're introducing this, and we're trying to get the farmers to take ownership for this. And it's a little hard, but they are starting to do that. The other thing that we're finding is when we'll have meetings sometimes twice a month, usually once a month. But what we noticed when we first started our meetings, we would have a meeting and we would discuss our agenda and ask them if they have anything else for us, and they say no. But what would happen is we would leave, or we'd go over to the side of the room, and they would start planning themselves. They never have a scrum. Okay. They never get together at the end of the month unless we tell them to get together. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about our successes. Let's talk about our failures. Mm-hmm. It's this, let's get everybody on the same page and let's understand what the key issues are. That's what we're trying to get them to do. And they're starting to do it. Mm-hmm. I want to follow up on one other thing, Jeannie, that you mentioned. How are we tracking? Well, we're tracking our inventory, but the farmer is also tracking his milk quality. Okay. So every time a co-op truck comes to take the milk out of the dairy, they have to measure the quality, and they have to do let's say contamination testing and all those
quality checks,
all sorts of quality checks. But if we set parameters of where we want to be, and we're reaching those, that's a positive thing. So early in the year we identify what our milk quality wants to be. And as long as we're tracking with that, that's fine. That's one of the ways they do it. If it's not tracking, then the nutritionist has to come in and say, what is it? Are we missing some sort of nutrition? So there may be some substitution. So there's this monitoring, there's this measuring and monitoring and adjusting going forward because the key thing is the milk quality.
Sure. So, okay. Like charts and graphs, not only just Gantt charts, but I'm sure you guys do a lot of charting and, right?
Starting to get more into that. But
pictures.
One of the things, and this is what I was hoping Jim would say, and watch his face when I say this. Sorry, guys, you can't see this. But when Jim and I started working together, the first thing he said was, "What steps do you do? In what order?"
See, that's what I
How
did
long
with
does
the
it
PMO.
Where does it go? What happens?
What is your business?
And this is the challenge, that we have a series of documents, Excel or Word documents, that come in, and we have steps to say, when we come on the farm, we've got the intro meeting, then within 48 hours, we're back on deck, we're measuring, we're getting this, and here's all the critical components that we have to gather. And I'm kind of curious on this, Jeanne, your thoughts too. It's hard to project manage yourself.
Let's use that as a teaser and say, unfortunately, and hard to believe, these hours go by so quick, but we're up on our hour, and we'll have Jeannie answer Thor offline. And if you want that answer, you can send in an email or a text or
Before we go, I'd like to give a shout out to my company, though, RGP, so Resources Global Professionals. Yeah. Any PMs out there who are looking for a job, this is one of the best companies in Arizona. Well, the world, actually. They're worldwide to work for. They treat you like an FTE, but you're a consultant, and they pay you for it. And it's a wonderful organization to work for. So RGP, Resources Global Professionals, it's a spinoff of Deloitte. It's been a while, and they're publicly traded too.
Any singing gigs or anything coming up that you want to share?
Working on that. I'm a karaoke lady. So right now, eventually I'm going to get a band together. I'm looking for a guitar player, a male guitar player who can sing. So really well. Pop rock covers kind of tunes, but I'm looking for an acoustic kind of a blend. And I want to start that up within the next couple of months and start playing out, just like a weekend here, a weekend there, coffee shops,
and if
lounges,
listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you? LinkedIn or email?
LinkedIn is the best way to, Jeanne Barry. So JeanneBarry, out of Phoenix, Arizona.
Great. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you.
Thor and Jim, any last words for our listeners about THORFeed and how they can get in touch with you to learn more about what you're doing?
Yes, we have our website, THORFeed.com. We have Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. So those are there. I'm on, Jim's there. So they can go through and do that, or they could email me directly, Thor@THORFeed.com.
Without the cape.
Without the cape.
But with the hammer.
With the hammer.
But let's, THORFeed, the Thor in THORFeed stands for threats, hazards, operational risks. So that acronym.
Okay. It's like a SWAT, but for Thor.
That's exactly.
Well, thank you all so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Joe.
Great conversation. Learned so much.
I did too. I have a whole new respect for farming.
It was great to learn.
I really do. Thanks, guys.
So for our listeners, this is a reminder that we're live the first and third Thursday each month. Our next show will be back on November 1st. We've got a great lineup of local and national guests on future shows. Also a reminder that these shows are recorded, so be sure to subscribe to Project Management Office Hours podcast on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, you name the platform. Whatever's your favorite, we're out there on all of them. Also, thank you to our sponsors, the PMO Squad. They're expert PMO and project management experts. They provide solutions that are not cookie-cuttered solutions. They're tailored for your organization. Head to the PMO Squad, where all we do is project management. We provide training, resources, PMO solutions, software selections, and help you implement your key strategic initiatives. Lastly, I'll also remind you, I've got my Marine Corps Marathon coming up, so please make a donation for our charity, Team Red, White, and Blue. which is a national organization. None of the money comes to me, just the pain from running the marathon. You can go
come on, Joe. It's going to be fun.
You can go to PMOJoe.com and find a link there to Team Red, White, and Blue's charity fundraising page. So that's it for now. Office hours are closed. Until next time, I'm PMO Joe, and you've been listening to Project Management Office Hours.